Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the fifth book in the series, marks a turning point as the wizarding world begins to fracture under the weight of denial, fear, and rising darkness. After witnessing the return of Lord Voldemort, Harry finds himself disbelieved by the Ministry of Magic, isolated at Hogwarts, and haunted by strange dreams. As he struggles with anger, confusion, and the burden of knowledge, he learns about the secret resistance group known as the Order of the Phoenix. The story follows his battles, not only against external enemies, but also with inner turmoil, growing responsibilities, and a new, oppressive teacher who makes life at school unbearable. With growing tension, high-stakes revelations, and a tragic loss, the book deepens the series' emotional gravity and sets the stage for war. About the author. J.K. Rowling is a British novelist, best known for writing the Harry Potter series, a cultural phenomenon that reshaped modern fantasy literature and captivated readers across generations. Her world of magic, friendship, and moral complexity has resonated globally, inspiring films, games, and spin-offs. With each book, Rowling expands the emotional and thematic depth of the series, transitioning from childhood wonder to serious explorations of truth, power, and resistance. Beyond her literary fame, she is known for her philanthropic efforts and for writing under the pseudonym Robert Galbraith for her crime fiction works. Summer had never felt so long for Harry Potter. After witnessing Lord Voldemort's return, he had been sent back to the Dursleys with no word from the wizarding world. The silence stretched on, leaving him angry, anxious, and full of questions. Each day felt like a punishment. He read the Muggle news hoping for a sign of magical happenings, but nothing came, and the letters from Ron and Hermione were short, vague, and frustrating. He knew something was going on, something big, and yet no one was telling him anything. Then, one evening, the unexpected happened. While walking near the park, Harry and his cousin Dudley were attacked by Dementors. In the middle of a hot summer's day, the air turned cold, and the world felt empty. Harry had to summon every ounce of strength to cast a Patronus charm and drive them away. It saved them both, but the use of magic outside school had broken ministry rules. Not long after, Harry received a letter informing him that he would face a disciplinary hearing and might be expelled from Hogwarts. But before he could even gather his thoughts, the night brought another surprise. A group of wizards and witches led by the stern but kind-eyed Mad-Eye Moody, the sharp-tongued Tonks, and others arrived at Privet Drive. They had come to take Harry somewhere safe. He was flown across the night sky on a broomstick to a hidden headquarters, the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix. This house belonged to Sirius Black, Harry's godfather. Hidden from the rest of the world, it buzzed with secrets and tension. The Order, he learned, was a group of witches and wizards who had banded together to fight Voldemort the first time and were doing so again now. Dumbledore led them, though he seemed to be avoiding Harry completely. Harry also discovered that the Ministry of Magic had been working hard to convince everyone that Voldemort hadn't returned, that Harry was lying, that Dumbledore was losing his mind, and that there was nothing to fear. This campaign of disbelief only deepened Harry's frustration. He wasn't lying. He had seen it all. But it didn't matter. The world wasn't listening. Soon, Harry was taken to the ministry for his hearing. Nervous and unsure, he stood in front of a full courtroom, including Cornelius Fudge, the Minister for Magic, who clearly wanted Harry punished. But Dumbledore appeared, calm and brilliant as always, and defended Harry. Thanks to Dumbledore's reasoning and testimony from a witness, Harry was cleared. He could return to Hogwarts, but Hogwarts didn't feel the same. The Ministry had placed a new teacher at the school Dolores Umbridge. She was clad in pink and smiled sweetly, but her rules were cruel, her punishments severe, and her refusal to teach real defensive magic dangerous. She was a spy for the Ministry, sent to keep an eye on Dumbledore and Harry. Slowly, she gained more and more power at the school, tightening her grip on everything, turning the once joyful place into a cold, watchful institution. She even banned students from forming clubs or groups without her permission. But the students knew the truth. Voldemort was back. Dark times were coming, and they needed to learn how to defend themselves. So in secret, a group of them came together to form what they called Dumbledore's Army, or DA for short. Led by Harry, who had more real experience with dark magic than any other student, they practiced spells, learned to defend themselves, and supported each other in the Room of Requirement, a magical room that appeared only when needed, hiding them from Umbridge's eyes. For Harry, teaching the DA gave him purpose, but nightmares still haunted his nights. He kept dreaming of a long corridor, a door at the end of it, and something beyond that door pulling him in. He didn't know what it meant, but the dreams felt real. Too real. As winter crept in, the castle grew colder, and so did Harry's temper. He was more irritable than usual, often snapping at friends and struggling to explain the storm that was building inside him. The pain in his scar returned in bursts, and each time it throbbed, the dream of the long corridor became more vivid. He felt like he was being pulled closer and closer to something he couldn't name. At the same time, life under Professor Umbridge grew even more unbearable. Her rules multiplied by the day. She banned the use of practical magic in her classes, refused to let students speak freely, and punished anyone who disagreed with her by forcing them to write lines using a special quill one that carved the words into the back of their hand. Harry experienced this firsthand, silently enduring the pain as "I must not tell lies" etched itself into his skin. The DA meetings became a source of strength. The group grew in confidence, mastering stunning spells, shielding charms, and disarming techniques. Even shy students like Neville Longbottom began to shine. He showed fierce determination, especially after revealing that his parents' once brilliant aurors had been tortured into madness by Death Eaters. It made Harry realize how personal this war was for so many, and how deep the wounds ran. Around Christmas, Harry had a vision that stopped him cold. In his dream, he became the snake Voldemort's snake, Nagini, and attacked Arthur Weasley, Ron's father, inside the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry of Magic. It felt so real, so physical, that Harry awoke screaming. When he told Professor McGonagall, Dumbledore acted at once, sending help and saving Mr. Weasley's life. But Dumbledore did something else, too. He distanced himself from Harry even more, hardly speaking to him, leaving him with more questions than answers. Instead, he arranged for Harry to begin occlumency lessons, magical training, to block the mind from external penetration. The teacher? Severus Snape. Harry hated the lessons. Snape was harsh, unkind, and delighted in Harry's failures. Locking emotions and closing one's mind was no easy task, especially for someone as fiery and impulsive as Harry. The sessions were exhausting, frustrating, and often ended with Harry feeling more vulnerable than ever. Back at school, things escalated. Umbridge was declared High Inquisitor of Hogwarts, giving her power over all other teachers. She sacked Trelawney, the divination professor, and tried to throw her out of the castle. But Dumbledore, silent for so long, stepped in not to stop her from firing Trelawney, but to let her stay at Hogwarts under his protection. He then hired a new divination teacher, a centaur named Firenze, breaking tradition and upsetting many. The DA continued to train in secret until one day their hiding place was discovered. A student had betrayed them. Umbridge stormed the room of requirement with a squad of loyal followers. Harry and several others were caught. It seemed like the end. But then Dumbledore took the blame. He claimed responsibility for forming the group and refused to let anyone else suffer. When Ministry officials arrived to arrest him, Dumbledore vanished in a blaze of magic, leaving only Fawkes, his phoenix, behind. The school was stunned. Umbridge was now headmistress. Without Dumbledore's protection, Hogwarts became a dreadful place. The atmosphere turned bleak, and students whispered in hallways, their spirits dimmed, but hope still flickered. Fred and George Weasley, full of mischief and rebellion, unleashed chaos upon Umbridge, setting off fireworks, prank products, and even turning a hallway into a swamp. Their grand finale? Flying out of the castle on broomsticks, never to return. It left everyone cheering. Despite everything, Harry's dreams returned with greater force. The corridor, the door, it was the Department of Mysteries. He felt he had to get there. And then one night the vision changed. He saw Sirius, his godfather, being tortured by Voldemort inside the department. Harry panicked. He had to save him. He rushed to find help, but no one would listen. Umbridge caught him trying to use her fireplace to contact Sirius and brought him in for questioning, but help came from unexpected allies. Hermione tricked Umbridge into following them into the Forbidden Forest, claiming a weapon was hidden there. Deep among the trees, they led her straight into the arms of the Centaurs Proud, wild creatures who took her away for her arrogance and insults. With Umbridge gone, Harry and a handful of DA members, Hermione, Ron, Neville, Luna, and Ginny flew to London on Thestrals, invisible creatures only seen by those who had witnessed death. They arrived at the Ministry and entered the mysterious, echoing halls of the Department of Mysteries. Inside, they found the door from Harry's dreams. Behind it was a room filled with orbs, whispering softly in the dark. And there they were ambushed. The room was cold, vast, and lined with shelves holding glass spheres that pulsed with strange energy. Harry's heart pounded. He was certain Sirius was near, that any moment he'd hear his voice. But instead, the silence was shattered by a group of hooded figures stepping out of the shadows, Death Eaters. They had been waiting. Lucius Malfoy, Bellatrix Lestrange, and others surrounded the students, demanding that Harry hand over the prophecy, the glowing orb he had unknowingly taken from the shelf. It was labeled with his name and Lord Voldemort's. Harry didn't understand why it mattered so much, only that it was important to the enemy. He refused. The room erupted in chaos. Spells flew in every direction. The students split up, dodging curses and hurling defensive charms as they raced through the strange, ever-shifting rooms of the Department of Mysteries. They fought with every bit of skill they had learned from Dumbledore's army, and still it wasn't enough. The Death Eaters were experienced, cruel, and unrelenting. Ron was hit by a curse that left him confused and stumbling. Hermione was knocked unconscious by a silent but powerful hex. Jenny's ankle was broken, and Luna was thrown hard across the floor. Neville, face bloodied, stood beside Harry with fierce determination, even as his nose bled and his wand hand trembled. He was braver than Harry had ever seen him. Cornered at last in the circular room, Harry and Neville clutched the prophecy as the Death Eaters closed in. Just when all seemed lost, help arrived. Members of the Order of the Phoenix burst through the door. Sirius Lupin, Tonks Moody, and Kingsley Shacklebolt. A furious duel erupted. Spells collided in brilliant explosions of light. The air was thick with smoke and screams. Harry fought beside Sirius, the godfather he loved, both casting spells in rhythm, backs to each other like warriors in a dream. And then it happened. In the madness of the battle, Bellatrix Lestrange sent a curse streaking through the air. It hit Sirius in the chest. For a moment, Harry thought he would recover. Sirius always bounced back, always smiled, always made things better. But he stumbled back, fell through a tall, ancient stone arch with a veil that fluttered in unseen wind. And he didn't come out. Harry ran forward, heart screaming louder than his voice. He reached the veil, called out, waited for an answer, but there was only silence. Lupin held him back. "He's gone," he whispered, his voice breaking. "There's nothing you can do." Harry couldn't believe it. Just like that, Sirius was gone, his last family, the person who truly understood him, ripped away in an instant. Bellatrix fled, and Harry chased her in fury. He wanted her to pay, to hurt like he did. He caught up with her and used a spell that knocked her to the ground. She laughed, taunting him, daring him to cast an unforgivable curse. He raised his wand, trembling with rage, but he couldn't do it. He wasn't like her. Then Voldemort appeared, not in a dream, not in a vision. In the flesh, he emerged from the shadows, colder and more terrifying than ever. Harry was alone with him now. Voldemort raised his wand to strike, and then Dumbledore arrived. What followed was a duel like nothing Harry had ever seen. Fire, water, glass, and magic more ancient than words filled the room. Dumbledore was fierce and commanding. Voldemort was deadly and fast. The two clashed in a storm of power that made even the Death Eaters run. For the first time, Harry saw just how deep the magic went, and just how dangerous Voldemort truly was. In desperation, Voldemort tried something else. He vanished and entered Harry's mind. Pain exploded in Harry's scar. He felt cold, twisted, filled with hatred that wasn't his. He saw through Voldemort's eyes and felt himself slipping. Voldemort was trying to possess him. But in that darkness, Harry found something Voldemort couldn't understand: love. Thoughts of Sirius, Ron, Hermione, and his parents flooded his mind. The warmth of friendship, the ache of loss, the stubbornness to keep going. And with that, Voldemort was forced out. When Harry opened his eyes, the atrium was filled with wizards. Cornelius Fudge himself had arrived just in time to see Voldemort vanish with a hiss. But it was enough. The truth was undeniable now. Voldemort was back. The war had begun. The Ministry could no longer pretend. After the battle in the Department of Mysteries, after seeing Voldemort with their own eyes, the truth hit them like a tidal wave. The newspapers changed their tune overnight. "He who must not be named returns," blared across headlines. Dumbledore's warnings were no longer ignored. Suddenly, the very people who had mocked Harry and called him a liar were now praising his bravery. But for Harry it didn't matter. He had lost Sirius. Back at Hogwarts, the news spread quickly. Whispers filled corridors. Some students were shocked, some frightened. The final days of the term passed in a haze of quiet dread. The world had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Harry wandered the castle in silence, numb to the praise and attention he was now receiving. Inside him was a storm he couldn't calm. He felt hollow, angry, and alone. The pain of losing Sirius didn't come all at once. It came in waves, sharp and heavy, catching him off guard when he saw something that reminded him of his godfather's crooked grin or his rebellious spark. He blamed himself. If he hadn't believed the dream, if he hadn't rushed off to the ministry, Sirius might still be alive. Again and again, he replayed the moment in his mind, wondering what he could have done differently. But in time, the people who loved him began to pull him back from that place of guilt. Luna Lovegood found him one afternoon and spoke with a gentleness that surprised him. She, too, had lost someone, her mother, and she believed, in her own quiet way, that those who had passed weren't truly gone. "Things we lose have a way of coming back to us in the end," she said, "if not always in the way we expect." It didn't take away the pain, but it gave him something to hold on to. At last, Harry was called to Dumbledore's office. The headmaster, who had avoided him for so long, finally looked him in the eye and told him everything. Harry sat in a high-backed chair as Dumbledore spoke with a mix of sorrow and gravity. He explained the prophecy, the reason Voldemort had targeted Harry in the first place. The glass orb that had shattered during the battle had contained a prophecy made before Harry was born, one that only those it was about could retrieve. And it had been about Harry and Voldemort. Neither can live while the other survives. That single line hung in the air like a thundercloud. Dumbledore explained that, because Voldemort had tried to kill Harry as a baby, he had unknowingly marked him as the one with the power to defeat him. In trying to prevent the prophecy, Voldemort had set it in motion. Harry was the chosen one, but the knowledge didn't come as a triumph. It came as a burden. It explained the pain, the danger, the loss. It meant that one day he would have to face Voldemort, not just to protect others, but because it was his fate. Dumbledore also confessed that he had made a mistake. He had kept the truth from Harry to protect him, to let him enjoy a few more years of childhood before the weight of destiny fell on his shoulders. But in doing so, he had left Harry feeling alone and unprepared. He admitted his faults, and in that moment showed Harry a rare vulnerability. The school year came to a quiet end. Umbridge had fled Hogwarts after her run-in with the Centaurs, and the corridors had slowly regained their spirit. The students celebrated exams being over, laughed in the sunshine, and talked nervously about what the future held. But for Harry, everything had changed. At the train station, members of the Order were there to see him off, keeping a close watch now that Voldemort was openly back. Moody, Tonks, and Lupin stood by as he said his goodbyes. Ron and Hermione promised to write, and Mrs. Weasley gave him a hug that said more than words ever could. As he stood there on the platform, suitcase in hand, Harry felt the loss of Sirius like a weight in his chest. But he also felt something else, a kind of quiet fire beginning to burn. He couldn't bring Sirius back, and he couldn't undo the past. But he could keep going. He had people who loved him, people worth fighting for. And he had something Voldemort would never understand, the power of loyalty, courage, and love. The war was no longer a distant storm. It had arrived. But Harry wasn't running from it anymore. He was ready to face whatever came next. The train ride home was quiet for Harry. The world outside the window blurred past, golden and green, but his thoughts were far from the countryside. Inside, he sat in a compartment with Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, and Luna, each of them marked by what they had been through, yet bound closer than ever by it. There was comfort in their presence, but also a heaviness in the air, as if they all knew they were leaving behind more than just the school year. Luna was the first to break the silence. She spoke with her usual dreamy tone, wondering aloud whether the Thestrals, the skeletal winged horses that had flown them to the ministry, would miss them. Neville said he hoped they'd see each other over the summer, and Ginny quietly said she was proud of what they'd done, even if no one else understood it. As the train neared King's Cross, the spell of their little cocoon began to lift. They stepped off onto the platform and were once again swallowed by the bustle of the ordinary world. Parents hugged their children. Trolleys rattled over the concrete. Owls hooted sleepily from their cages. Harry spotted the Dursleys waiting, Uncle Vernon looking sour, Aunt Petunia stiff and watchful, Dudley pale and quiet since the Dementor attack. As he walked toward them, still half lost in thought, something unexpected happened. Mad-Eye Moody stepped forward, his magical eye whirring, and warned the Dursleys that Harry was under the protection of the Order. "Treat him properly," he growled, "or you'll have us to answer to." The message was clear. Harry had people looking out for him now. The summer that followed was slow and strange. Harry returned to Privet Drive, but it no longer felt like a prison. He had changed too much, grown too much. The house couldn't hold him the way it once had. He spent his days thinking, writing back and forth with Ron and Hermione, and trying to make sense of everything. Sometimes he'd sit with Hedwig in his room, her white feathers glowing in the light, and just talk to her as if she understood. She usually listened better than most people. He also received letters from others in the D.A. messages of support, thanks, encouragement. Neville's handwriting was shaky but full of gratitude. Luna's letter was decorated with strange drawings and soft wisdom. Even students he barely knew had reached out, letting him know he wasn't alone. But the grief still lingered. Sirius's death came back to him in flashes, the veil, the silence, the cold emptiness. Some nights he'd wake up gasping, heart pounding, sure he'd heard Sirius's voice. And then there were moments when he caught himself smiling at a memory only for the ache to return harder. One day he received a package from Remus Lupin. Inside was a letter and an old photo of the original Order of the Phoenix, his parents, Sirius, Lupin, Moody, and others all smiling, some with their arms slung around each other, some now long gone. Lupin's note was short but full of feeling. "He loved you, Harry. He never stopped." That simple line stayed with Harry. It didn't take away the sadness, but it helped him carry it. And slowly the days began to turn. He remembered what Dumbledore had told him, that the prophecy didn't decide his fate. It only predicted that he could be the one to defeat Voldemort, but only if he chose to. What set him apart, Dumbledore had said, was not his power or his skill. It was his heart. Voldemort chose Harry as his equal, but Harry didn't have to become like him. He had something Voldemort would never truly grasp: love, loyalty, friendship. And though it didn't feel like a weapon, Harry had seen its strength. By midsummer he was starting to find his balance again. He helped a neighbor mow the lawn, not because he had to, but because it felt good to do something normal. He and Dudley still didn't speak much, but something between them had shifted. There was an understanding there, quiet and unspoken, born from the fear they'd both felt the night of the Dementor attack. Then came a letter from Dumbledore, short, kind, and unexpected. It didn't say much, only that he hoped Harry was well, and that they would meet soon. But it was the signature that mattered. With best wishes, Albus Dumbledore. Harry held the letter for a long time. He wasn't sure what the next school year would bring. Voldemort was back, the Order was active, and the world was changing quickly. There would be danger, there would be loss, but there would also be hope. He wasn't just a boy with a scar anymore. He was a young man who had faced darkness and stood firm, not without fear, but with courage in spite of it. And most importantly, he knew now that he didn't have to carry it all alone. He had friends. He had family, even if it looked different than most. And he had a reason to keep fighting. The days passed with a stillness that seemed to float between two storms. The sky was blue, the streets quiet, but Harry knew the peace was borrowed time. The world was holding its breath. The Ministry was finally admitting the truth, and whispers of fear spread through wizarding families, shops, and newspapers. People were vanishing. Rumors of Death Eater attacks were no longer ignored. But even so, not everything was fear and silence. Ron and Hermione sent letters more often, filled with little stories of their summer Hermione helping her parents at their dental practice, Ron playing endless games of wizard chess with his brothers, both of them constantly looking forward to returning to Hogwarts. Fred and George had opened their joke shop in Diagon Alley, and it was already a massive success. It was loud, chaotic, and filled with color, everything the world needed more of. Harry smiled, reading about it. He knew Sirius would have loved it. Still, grief lingered like a shadow that changed shape, but never truly left. Sometimes Harry would wake and forget for just a second that Sirius was gone. And then the weight would return. But something had shifted inside him. Instead of drowning in the ache, he was learning to carry it. Sirius's memory wasn't only tied to the pain. It was tied to the way he laughed, the way he fought, the way he believed in Harry completely, without hesitation. At Privet Drive, things were different, too. Not warm never, but no longer openly cruel. Perhaps it was the memory of Mad-Eye Moody's warning, or perhaps something had softened after the Dementor attack. Whatever the reason, the Dursleys kept their distance. Harry spent most of his time in his room, reading, writing, and thinking. He reread his old letters, replayed memories, and found strength in the smallest moments. He remembered Luna's quiet belief in things unseen, Neville's fierce loyalty, Hermione's cleverness and courage, Ron's laughter even in dark places, and he realized that this circle of friends, this growing family of people who cared, was his true strength. The war would not be won by power alone. It would be won by love. One afternoon, Hedwig arrived with a letter from Dumbledore. It invited Harry to spend a few final days of the summer at the Burrow, the Weasley home. It wasn't just for safety. It was to rest, to reconnect, and to prepare. The moment he read the letter, something brightened in him. He packed his things quietly, fed Hedwig a treat, and took one last look around his room. When the members of the Order came to fetch him, they didn't come in a storm of magic this time. It was simple. Tonks smiled and greeted him with a wink. Lupin gave him a gentle pat on the back, and together they left Privet Drive. At the Burrow, the world felt alive again. Mrs. Weasley bustled about the kitchen. Ron and Ginny argued over chores, and the house echoed with warmth and noise. Hermione joined them not long after, and together the three of them wandered through golden fields, shared quiet meals, and talked long into the night. There were no grand pronouncements or heavy speeches, just little moments like the clinking of spoons and teacups, the squeal of gnomes being tossed from the garden, the flicker of candlelight as laughter bubbled up around the dinner table. Harry didn't say much at first, but his friends didn't push him. They knew. They understood. And when he was ready, he started talking again. About Sirius, about the prophecy, about the fear that lived under his skin and the fire that lived beside it. And as he spoke, he saw something in their eyes, not pity, but resolve. They were with him. No matter what came next, he wouldn't face it alone. When the time came to return to Hogwarts, they packed their trunks, fed their owls, and loaded onto the Hogwarts Express once more. The train whistled, steam curling through the air, as if inviting them toward whatever waited ahead. Inside the compartment, they sat together again, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, and Luna. It felt like a circle had been drawn. They were no longer just students. They were a quiet army, a family. Harry looked out the window as the train pulled away from the station, the field stretching into the distance, and the sky blooming with clouds. His heart still ached, but it beat steady, stronger than before. He knew that darker days were coming. Voldemort was gathering followers, and the world was tilting toward danger. But he also knew this. He was not afraid to fight. He was not afraid to feel, and he would never be alone again. The future was uncertain, the war not yet won. But as long as he had love, real, deep, stubborn love, he had everything he needed to face it. And so Harry Potter leaned back in his seat, surrounded by friends, the past behind him, the road ahead, and the strength of hope burning in his chest. And so the story continues not with the end of a battle, but the beginning of something greater. Though loss and darkness cast long shadows, Harry has found what matters most, the unbreakable bond of friendship, the quiet strength of love, and the courage to carry on, even when the path ahead is uncertain. The world may be changing, but he is ready, because the brightest light is born from the deepest night. And as long as he walks forward with hope in his heart, there will always be magic. Good night, and until the next adventure.